Welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for being with us. Now, have you ever been having a conversation with someone and in the middle of your anecdote, the person starts answering a message on their phone or maybe even scrolling on social media? Maybe you're guilty of this too. It's not a great feeling, and it is a real phenomenon that has a name. Phubbing, or phone snubbing. This is when we ignore the people around us in favor of our screens, and its effects can be more than just annoying. As we enter holiday season, which is a time known for gathering with friends and family, we wanted to explore how do we make sure that being together means being present with each other, not just while we're opening presents. Today, we will ask how to do that, at least temporarily, how to unplug in a world wired to our phones. We'll talk about how children can stay safe on the internet, how adults can navigate their own social media and device use, and how devices in general, while powerful tools for connection, can also drive a wedge between us and have consequences for our health. Joining me in studio today, we have Maureen Kyle. She is the host of The Parenting Playbook. You can find that on Fox 8. She's also an independent communications consultant with the company Modern Classic Media. Maureen, thanks for being here.
Stephanie, thank you for asking me. This will be a great conversation.
Very excited to have you here for it and to get into it. We also have a couple people joining us by phone today. We have Dr. Shane Tilton, PhD, Associate Professor of Writing and Multimedia Studies at Ohio Northern University, and author of Meme Life, the social, cultural, and psychological aspects of mimetic communication. Hi, Dr. Tilton. Welcome to the show today.
Stephanie, thank you for having me. This is going to be a wonderful conversation, I believe.
And my first question for you is, did I pronounce that properly? Mimetic communication. Is that right?
Mimetic.
Mimetic.
So it doesn't roll off the tongue quite well, but yeah, it's mimetic. Mimetic communication. So
mimetic
it's a way of
communication.
replicating.
Got it.
Yep.
All right. We also have Francesca Vargo with us, the Senior Prevention Coordinator of Community Prevention Services at the Prevention Action Alliance in Columbus. I have a feeling it has something to do with prevention. Hi, Fran. Welcome to the Sound of Ideas.
It sure does. Thank you for having me, Stephanie. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Now, if you would like to join the conversation, I'm talking to our audience now, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also send us an email at soi@ideastream.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram. We are at The Sound of Ideas. Now, Shane, I'll start with you. A lot of families will be gathering this season, and a lot of people may end up scrolling instead of talking. So talk to us about how phubbing looks in real life and how it impacts our relationships.
Well, I mean, the first thing to recognize is that typically when we have these devices with us, they are sort of, for lack of a term, our connection to the outside world. So even when we are engaging with our friends and families, the people that we care about, there still is a need to feel like we are still part of the larger society. So what phubbing tends to look like is you'll see it when someone mentions, there's a football game coming up during Thanksgiving. I wonder who's playing. The initial response is to grab for your phone because it is the source of information. It's a way that you are finding out what's happening in your world. So when you see it happening more and more, and as my wife loves to joke with me, it's when I get down the rabbit hole of social media that she knows she's lost me. So it's really where the presence of the phone supersedes the presence of being in that environment that you're in with your friends and family.
Thanks for breaking that down for us, Shane. Now, Maureen, you work in media.
Yes.
And you're also raising 3 young girls. So how does your family handle boundaries around screen time at home just on any given day?
Yeah. My kids are 12, 10, and 7. So the 12-year-old is just starting to get interested in the phone. So we have a family cell phone. We don't have individual cell phones for them yet, but it's our way of communication. So our rule with that phone is it acts like it is a old landline. It has to be plugged into the kitchen. It is on the kitchen counter. Sometimes it does get sneaked away to a bedroom or somewhere, but that way I can monitor exactly how they're using it and when they're using it. We do not bring the phones to the table, although I'm the one who's probably more guilty of that than anybody. And then in terms of devices and screen time, there are all of these there are parameters that you can put in, parental controls that limit screen time or at least alert you to the screen time. Now, mine have not really delved too deep into, disappearing for hours on their phones or on a device. But I do tell them once homework's done and once chores are done, and then I let them in front of me use, play a game or watch a TV show, but it is very limited. And I do that on purpose.
I'm wondering when our devices now are tracking screen time, my wheels are just turning as we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
If every time I ask Siri a question, if that counts as screen time.
Right.
We talk a lot.
We get those alerts as adults of like, I don't know, what days does that come out on Sundays where it's like, here's your weekly phone use or weekly device use. I don't even look at it because I don't want to know.
I don't want to add that to my screen time. It's already high enough.
Exactly.
All right, Fran, let's bring you into the conversation now. Tell us more about Prevention Action Alliance, what your organization does. And also, you write something called No Tips. So tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We are a statewide nonprofit dedicated to preventing substance misuse and promoting mental health wellness. So we work with communities, coalitions, behavioral health organizations, schools, and community groups to help them with their prevention needs. So the No Tips program are these weekly, bi-weekly newsletters that go out to parents, teachers, and caring adults with practical tips about youth behavior, mental health, and substance use. And as you can imagine, we do a lot about social media and digital well-being because that is really important.
We have an email now in from Rob. Rob writes, "It's simple. Realize your phone rules your life and take charge. Leave it away from the table." Rob says, "I'm not holier than thou, but I regularly put my phone on the table for emergencies and basically ignore it." Rob says hosts also have the right and option to ban phones from their table. Just talk to people. Rob, thank you very much for sharing your perspective with the Sound of Ideas. I think that can be easier said than done. So Shane, I'm going to direct this next question to you. Why is it so hard for people to disengage from their phones, even when they're in an in real life, social, person-to-person setting?
Well, and so I appreciate the question that the audience member gave. I think that you're hitting on the point that it is more difficult because when you think about holiday time, it is essentially a stoppage that you are expected to disconnect from the rest of the world because it is what makes the holidays the holidays. You are supposed to celebrate friends and family. The world doesn't quite work that naturally where the disconnection is the easiest thing. My family, both when I go to my mom's or my dad's for Thanksgiving, yeah, we'll put the phones aside. My dad has worked in government for like 15 years, and he is still connected because there's still emergencies to deal with. And while it is, it can be comforting to think that the holidays can be this isolated, sacred place where families are not invaded by the outside world. The outside world still exists. And when you are dealing with day-to-day activities through your phone, the phone does not recognize there's a holiday. And maybe it could be just a temporary put aside, but as someone that has family that works in hospitals, has family that works in the government, that's really difficult. And you expect no's. I think the answer is having situational awareness. Being present now helps, but realizing that there is an outside world.
We have a call now from Allie in Cleveland. Allie, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, on the bit about emergencies, I guess I'm looking for a tip because my family will often couch their phone use in the fact that there could be an emergency at any minute, and so they need to constantly have them around. And since we don't have any landlines now, it gives them free license to constantly have their phones about, even though the reality is I don't think I've ever been with them when an emergency has come through on one of their cell phones. So I'm looking for a tip on how to kind of rebuttal that and just ask that it not be, used as a cover to always have their phones. As my sister, I will say, does this kind of constant scrolling a bit conversation.
Thank you very much for the question, Allie. We appreciate it. Shane, do you have something you'd like to add about Allie's particular question about the emergency as maybe as an excuse or a reason for keeping the phone close by?
Well, I would love to hear what the rest of the panel has to say, but I think the short answer would be have a clear definition of what emergency is, because it sounds like emergency is one of those nebulous terms that no one has it down. So is emergency life or death? Is emergency that if you don't show up, you're going to be fired? Have that clear distinction. And I think that if everyone agrees to that definition, I think that's helpful. But I'm curious what everyone else thinks.
Maureen, I'll ask you, do you
Yeah.
have something in mind that is an emergency for you and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm always taking that call?
Yeah, I mean, as a parent, with now my 12-year-old as the babysitter at home, when I'm out, and let's say it's a work dinner or some other social event, that is where it could be my excuse to, hey, I have to have the phone out on the dinner table because what if my daughter calls because something, it's an emergency, right? My question maybe for Allie is, does his sister have a watch? Because that's where I have the watch that's attached to my phone, which will alert me if there's a call or if there's a text that comes through. So that way I can put away my phone and I get, the little notification on the watch where then I can glance at it and go, okay, that is an emergency or that isn't an emergency. And that at least takes the element of scrolling or the temptation to constantly be checking it, looking at every news alert, or just popping open Instagram and scrolling through. So that's how I kind of handle those emergencies or calls that would be an emergency. I think there's also some features you can put on your phone where if it is an emergency, like certain numbers are allowed to break through the do not disturb. So there you go. I mean, there's a few holes in that.
Focus is have your capability.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that too. I know if you do have your phone on Do Not Disturb, if someone calls repeatedly, then that phone line, whatever it is, because they're calling repeatedly, will be able to break through that Do Not Disturb feature. Fran, I'll ask you, do you have anything that you'd like to add to the caller Allie's question?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Shane. I think having that conversation and agreeing on a definition of an emergency opens you up for mutual accountability. That way, you can call each other out if you're saying, hey, you're on your phone too much. We both agreed that we wouldn't be on our phone unless it was an emergency. Those kind of things. I also know that in my personal life, I've never had something be so urgent that I needed to be looking on my phone the whole time. If something's really urgent, someone will call me and that call will come through, like you said, if there's repeated calling. So I think just being really clear about what constitutes an emergency and just being open to saying, hey, I think I'm using this as a crutch, as opposed to really having it out for an emergency.
I think we've really hit on a hot topic here. We have Gary now calling in from Brook Park who would like to add to this conversation. Gary, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Hi, how are you doing today? Nice conversation.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for calling in. What would you like to add to the conversation?
I just wanted to add that I'm a facilities manager, and I've been on emergency call for 37 years now, ever since there was just pagers and stuff like that. But the phone's always on my hip on a holster. If it goes off, I take it out. I don't have any apps. I don't play games or anything like that. It's just always with me. Always has been, and probably will be till I'm retired. Thanks for the conversation.
Thanks for calling in, Gary. We appreciate it. Having it on your hip is a little different than having it on the table, right? So I think we're moving in the right direction there. Shane, I want to ask you, what are the biggest misunderstandings that you see between generations when it comes to phone use? I think young people get a lot of flack for being, quote, worse with their phones. Is that true, or are they just using them differently? What do you see?
I'm going to go with differently. I think so the first thing I tend to mention whenever there's conversation about generations can do a really great job, defining specific demographic components. There tends to be a lot more fuzziness when it comes to social issues like this. What I'll tend to say is that typically when we're talking about younger people, that there is sort of they're seen as the phone is sort of driving their lives. It goes to a technological determinism, is what we would say, that the phone is driving everything. And I think it's important to remember that the phone is just a mechanism of connection, that it is something that allows them to connect with friends. So think about it. So I'm in my 40s now. And when I was a teenager, I would want to go out with my friends. So it would not have the cell phone, but my friends would call my landline and say, hey, can Shane come and hang out with us. So that was the interruption. So it's just that the technology now has made that more fluid into our lives. There isn't a barrier of the landline phone. There's a direct connection to the person. So I think that's where the confusion lies, and also that younger people are deemed better equipped to deal with technology, that they have the ability, that they've been around it for longer, therefore it's part of their everyday lives. For older generations, that's not necessarily the case.
We have an email now in from Claudia in Kent, kind of along this topic. Claudia says, sadly, we have allowed the phone to define what the outside world is. Really has become something very integrated into our everyday lives. Claudia, thank you very much for the comment. And that segues into my next question for you, Maureen. So your job requires you to be online a lot. So how do you balance that with trying to model healthy phone habits for the young people that you're raising?
Yeah, it's a struggle every day because, like I mentioned, and like what Shane was talking about, the younger generation grows up around this technology, and it's our job to teach them the healthy ways to use it. And so, as a parent, you're preaching, do not spend every minute on the phone. When somebody's talking to you, put the phone down and pay attention and, put it away. Or maybe you only have an hour with this phone. But Stephanie, you and I had talked about this the other day. All the little details, everything is in the phone. So we can sit here and say, "Oh, we're better than we're better than that. We can put our phones down." But when my daughter asks, "Okay, so what time do I need to leave for my practice and who's taking me?" I'm double checking the carpool. I'm getting texts. This is when they're home. I'm finishing up that email. Maybe another one is going, "Mom, mom, mom," and I'm in the middle of texting the carpool chain or finishing up that email at work. So I find myself using my phone more than I'd like to in front of them. And they've caught me and they've said, Mom, you're on your phone, you're on your phone. And then I've had to explain to them, this is how we're communicating and this is how I'm finding out where you're going tonight. Or they'll ask me a question about their homework and I'll have to double check, my computer or my email to see what the teacher has said. So it is our form of communication. It is, anything they ask, I've told them one time, I said, anytime you ask me a question, maybe 50%, and that's a low ball, 50% of the time, I'm going to have to check my phone to get you that answer because it might be something about a schedule or what the teacher requires or what that homework is. So that's the difficult balance is I'm trying to model this behavior where we don't need technology and we are not in front of the phone all the time. However, everything is on the phone. So I do get caught.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just thinking about this as you're describing what happens when your children ask you a question that you need to find the answer to. We're not walking over to the fridge and checking a calendar. We are then opening up a device, a phone, that has access to everything else in our lives and notifications. So maybe we check that calendar to see what time the sports practice is, and then all of a sudden we get a text message too that takes us out of that moment and distracts us to something else. Or we see an email pop up from a critical client that's on a deadline that you need to address, and that kind of thing. So then it becomes an interesting question of trying to explain a value judgment to a young person of, well, when I'm on my phone, this is life maintenance. When you're on your phone, you might be, scrolling social media or something else that is also valuable because it is a form of communication, but it's a different thing. So it's all very interesting. Fran, I want to ask you, you're a member of Gen Z. That's the generation born roughly between 1997 and 2012. So what is your personal relationship with social media like?
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to point out, I agree with Maureen. I think the idea of explaining to your young person what you're doing on your phone can be really helpful if they're going, hey, why are you on your phone all the time? Really explaining what you're doing can help you not get distracted and caught up in that.
Yeah.
As far as my personal relationship, I think I'm on my phone too much. I, like the rest of us, ignore that little Sunday screen time notification. I don't like to see it. So I think it's really about investigating my own personal relationship with technology and doing my best to think about, how does social media make me feel? Are there parts of being on my phone that make me feel good? Are there parts that make me feel bad? And then if there are parts that make me feel bad, how can I limit those? So I think it's a lot of doing an introspection, which is maybe harder to do when you're a young person and you just want to be on the phone all the time.
We have an email in now from Jason. Jason says, there is a movement of dumb phones. Light phone is one option. It allows for texting, maps, email, and music, but without the apps and extended connectivity. Personally, Jason is looking at it as Jason's next device. Jason, thank you very much for sharing that comment with us here on The Sound of Ideas. I want to remind everyone that we are talking about phubbing, which is the term for snubbing people in real life and looking at your phone or your screen or whatever device it is and taking yourself out of that in-person interaction. So if you have a comment or a question, the number to call is 866-578-0903, and you can email us at soi@ideastream.org. So keeping on with that question of the dumb phone, the dumb smartphone that doesn't have all of that connectivity. Fran, do you think that we should try to separate these things on our devices? Do you think that would be a positive move, taking off the games and all of those other things that we use on our phones?
I think it really depends on your personal relationship with your phone. If you are mainly using your phone as a connection device and you really like what social media offers as a connection, then I don't think it makes sense to get rid of that. But if you're finding yourself doom scrolling, if you're finding yourself just spending more time on your phone than you'd like to, then I think that's a great idea. I really do think it tends to be very personal for how you are using your phone.
Let's keep going with that topic on doom scrolling. And Shane, I'll ask you to weigh in on this. What is doom scrolling for people that don't know, and how harmful can that be?
So the way that I explain doom scrolling to typically my parents or typically to that generation is that you start to go to a service or a platform that you like, Facebook, and essentially what you see are those pieces of content that strike a nerve with you, that we're not going to say depression because that's not the right term, but it puts you in a state of mind that you need to keep feeding more pieces of information to deal with these feelings of anxiety. So the way that I look at doom scrolling is that it is going down the rabbit hole to try to search for that little piece of dopamine to make you feel better about the world. And that's where you start to say that you don't have a healthy relationship with your phone. It becomes a mechanism of control as opposed to a way to engage with the world.
I want to pick up on the conversation here about knowing what people are doing when they're looking at their phones. Maureen, I'll turn to you on this. What have you found to be helpful to, monitor what it is that your children are seeing when they are using that family phone, or maybe when they're accessing the internet at school or somewhere that's not maybe right there in your home?
Yeah, and that's a big topic with parents too. And I even saw I was scrolling through my phone and saw some information about the access that kids have at school because they are on Chromebooks or they are on some device to use for school, but then they have this free time. They're whatever access the school gives them, and going in line with what everybody was just talking about. There was one time my daughter came home and said that she was allowed to go onto YouTube Shorts, like she was watching YouTube Shorts at school. And she came to me and she said, Mom, I feel bad about myself. Something made me sad. And of course I dug in, and I'm terrified of what she found when she was just scrolling, not under my control. And she said, this girl had sweatshirts and I really liked her sweatshirts and I felt really bad that I didn't have those sweatshirts. So that just goes to show you, I can have as much control as I want at home, but there are devices everywhere. There are devices, if she goes to a friend's house and they have devices that they're allowed to use and they're not the same rules, or even at school, they are allowed on devices. So it's hard to control. So what we do is teach as best we can. So when I am monitoring what they're doing, I have to, as a parent, teach them the healthy use of it. I can't say you're totally not allowed to play games because then they're going to go sneak games when they're at school. So I try to monitor exactly what games they're using. And at this point, I can say if you're not learning anything, then we're not going to use that game. I read all of their text messages. And I tell them that's not your phone, it's my phone. So I'm reading the text messages. We do not have social media at this point for the kids. I had a friend of mine say that when her daughter comes to approach her, this is one of my daughter's friends, and asks for social media, she's going to tell her, print out, give me a report on how it's healthy for you, on all the benefits of social media, and then we can decide. But you have to make that PowerPoint presentation to me before you're allowed to get social media. So again, we don't have that yet happening in our house, but I know we're on that edge of that cliff.
Fran, I want to ask you, what are your biggest concerns that come to mind when you think about how young people are interacting with digital media?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of risks that come with being online. There's cyberbullying and online harassment, exposure to violence and misinformation, hateful language, those sorts of things. Maureen, like what you mentioned with that kind of comparison, those can be really harmful, as well as I think we see a lot of these digital well-being challenges with I'm on my phone instead of going to sleep, those sorts of things. Those are the biggest problems that we see. But I did want to add that I think it's a really important protective factor to be able to come to an adult and talk to them, Maureen, like you were saying your daughter did. And so, like you said, we can't control all of the risks that kids are going to experience on their phones, but we can build a relationship where they feel like they can come to us if they've seen something that made them feel bad.
Now, we've been talking a lot about the pitfalls when it comes to using our devices. It's a complicated conversation, though, because there are positives to it, too. Now, Shane, you wrote a book about memes, and we'd like to ask you now, tell us about how memes have evolved to become a shared language, maybe a love language in some ways, and how they can actually help people foster connection.
Well, yeah, because typically, as I define memes in my book, they are these active communication constructions. And to connect it to this idea of phubbing, basically, what you want to be able to do in any environment is try to get closer to your friends and family. So the classic example is whenever I go back to Thanksgiving, I'll share like the memes I discovered about cats because my family loves cats, and there's humor to that, but there's ways of having sort of this shared identity. And I think where memes become these powerful tools is because they could be modified. So as part of a digital conversation, you can create memes on these very simple platforms online, create new ones, and share it through texting or whatever. So I think if we're looking at snubbing or phubbing as a disconnective agent of society, you have to look at communication tools that are connective agents of society, and memes just happen to be one of those connective agents.
Fran, when we think about how young people use digital devices, in your experience, in your professional capacity, and also as your experience as a member of Gen Z, I'd like to ask you, do young people prefer digital communication? Do they prefer it in general, first of all? If you can speak, I know, it's not a monolith, but as generally as you can speak for us. And if so, or if not, if you could tell us kind of why that might be.
I'll speak to myself. I generally do a mixture of both. And I think that young people do as well. I would say that on the whole, you're seeing young people find ways to connect, like Shane was saying, through memes, through different social media trends. That can be really beneficial. They can be a really great way to connect with faraway friends. They can be a really great way to connect when you're at home and you don't have a car and don't have an ability to get to be in person with your friends. So I think we see a mixture. And I know that's not a great straightforward answer, but I really do think it isn't a monolith and it really depends.
Well, I do think it's indicative of the complicated conversation that we're having today. Something that comes to mind to me, Fran, I'll just ask you a quick follow-up here, is When you're writing something out, sometimes, if I'm having a conversation or a disagreement with someone, it's easier for me to marshal my thoughts if I write it out. So is that a piece of it at all? Just being able to process and not necessarily having to do it immediately in real time verbally with someone?
I think that makes sense as part of that process. I think as well as if you get used to communicating with writing out your thoughts and you get used to doing more things on your phone, that becomes more comfortable for you. So you have that processing time as opposed to live and in person where you might be afraid of making mistakes.
I'll tell you what, sometimes I'm better with an edit. Especially in a disagreement, I can be way better with an edit. We have a call now from Jenny Lynn in Toledo. Jenny, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Jennifer Lynn, Jenny Lynn. I wrote Jesus is the Reason in the 70s, and it's concerning to me when I go into a room and people are on their phones and they don't acknowledge you. I think it's a good idea if someone's on the phone and you're in a room and they just acknowledge you and say hello. And I even have a problem with this with my sons when we own a business and they're gaming with each other. And I say, hello, I haven't seen you for 10 days. Can you just acknowledge me? So I just think this is something that we have to work on in our society.
Thank you very much for the comment, Jenny Lynn. We appreciate it. We're talking about phubbing, which is the concept of snubbing the people you are with in real life in favor of screens or devices or some other technological thing. If you have a comment or a question you'd like to share, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also send us an email at soi@ideastream.org. I'll share an email now from Emily. Emily writes in, as a 43-year-old mom of a 13-year-old and an 8-year-old, I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you for that, Emily. Emily goes on to say, something we try to do in our family is step away from the table or the conversation if we get a message or a notification that needs our immediate attention. Take care of what needs to be taken care of and come back. Easier said than done, but we do try. Emily, thank you very much for that perspective. Maureen, I'll ask you now, is anything like that something you've implemented? I know there is no off time for you. You're an entrepreneur, so you don't have a 9-to-5 work schedule. What does that look like?
Yeah. It's just constant finding pockets of time. And like we've been talking about, I mean, it's hard because some things do need your immediate attention. There's, basic rules I set for myself of making sure I get back to people in a timely manner, making sure that I answer my phone when I do get that text or that phone call. But again, that could be in the middle of family time. So the benefit of being an entrepreneur is the flexibility. The downfall is the flexibility, meaning, there's, yes, I can sit at the table and probably clear everything else out of my schedule for about half an hour to sit and eat. And then they see me go to my computer and start to work on things. Or, I'm on my phone answering something in the middle of the day. It's just very, it's a difficult balance act. And I see it doesn't even have to be entrepreneur. My husband is an attorney. He's constantly having to check his email, respond to emails. It's tough. It's tough.
It certainly is. Now, we're going to continue this conversation for several more minutes here, but we do need to say goodbye to Shane. So, Shane, I'll ask you before we say goodbye to you, do you have any takeaways you'd like to share with us about the conversation of phubbing we've been having?
Yes. Once again, thank you for having me. I think the two things I want to make clear is that children will model the behaviors that they see their parents. So to be beneficial towards everyone, and to go back to what the previous caller was saying, situational awareness, trying to know who's around you, what's going on, to be beneficial. And I think the biggest thing is make sure there's breathing room during family and friends gatherings, because if we're constantly on top of one another, we're going to feel overwhelmed, and the phone becomes the easiest mechanism for escape. So once again, thank you for having me for the conversation. I apologize for needing to go, but thank you very much for having me.
We really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Shane. That was Dr. Shane Tilton, PhD, Associate Professor of Writing and Multimedia Studies at Ohio Northern University, and author of Meme Life, The Social, Cultural, and Psychological Aspects of Memetic Communication, which I know I said it right that time, but I didn't say it right the first time. Thank you very much, Dr. Tilton. We appreciate it. Now, we are having this conversation because we are approaching the holidays. So I think Shane just mentioned very interestingly there that the phone can be a little bit of a breathing room. You know, it's kind of the walk around the block maybe for some people. So that's something interesting to keep in mind as we answer this next question. I'll ask both of our remaining panelists, Maureen and Fran, this. Fran, I'll start with you. What advice do you have specifically for the upcoming holidays?
Yeah, I think it's important to build in some unstructured time, especially for young people. It's really good to have these moments of we're not on our phone, but we don't have anything planned, to try to find that kind of relief that Shane was talking about. It's really hard when everybody's all coming together and you can get really overwhelmed. So building in some time where you don't have any activities planned, just an opportunity for everyone to find something that they want to do, that they're looking forward to doing. As well as specifically for the holidays, we talk a lot about making sure that, and specifically for young people, but I think this goes for everyone as well, making sure that everyone feels involved, and feels like they have a meaningful role. I know sometimes with younger kids, if, mom and dad are cooking, they don't feel like they can contribute to that, so they're going to go on their phone. So finding, a way to get people involved in what's going on can help provide that kind of alternative activity, instead of being on social media.
And Maureen, what about you? Any particular advice for the holidays?
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity for the younger generation, for the kids in the family. This is something I'm not hosting, so here's what I would do. Is on the way to the family member's house who is hosting, I would set my expectations and say, there's no devices. This is face-to-face time. This is a great opportunity for kids to look an adult in the eye and have a conversation and practice that type of communication that is so necessary. And one of the reasons I started my communications consulting business is because I kept hearing that younger people had a hard time with the soft skills, the soft communication skills. And when I was growing up, there was an understanding that at family dinners, which we had every week, that was the time to have a conversation with the adults in the family about my grandpa would always ask what book I'm reading, or, talking to aunts and uncles. This is a safe space. This is family. This is not like some stranger that you're talking to. What a perfect place to practice that one-on-one conversation, communication skills that are device free. So yes, I agree that there's probably downtime that needs to be built into the day, but that can be before the family gathering, before the dinner, I don't know anybody who gathers from 8 a.m. until 9 or 10 p.m. So there will be downtime in the day, but set the expectation that when we're there, that is the time to practice having that conversation about how your day is, what you're up to, asking adults questions and looking them in the eye.
We have an email now from Matthew from Cleveland Heights. Matthew writes, "Me and my family embrace the world at our fingertips. We will often share funny videos at the dinner table. We should not just look at devices as a bad or evil thing. My youngest is 9, and it adds to her tech savviness. Understanding technology will help manage it later in life." Matthew, thank you very much for sharing that perspective. That's an interesting thought, too, and that's just a thought I think that we'll end on here, is that you can use your devices in many ways. You can use them to foster connectivity. We talked about that with meme conversations. If something catches your interest, you can share that with the people in the room. So little takeaway there from me. Not that anybody asked for it, but you're getting it. I'll thank our panelists now for joining us. Maureen Kyle, host of the Parenting Playbook on Fox 8 and an independent communications consultant with Modern Classic Media. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And on the phone, we have Francesca Varga, Senior Prevention Coordinator of Community Prevention Services at the Prevention Action Alliance in Columbus. Thank you so much, Fran.
Thank you for having me.